Welcome to Pennsylvania in Focus. I'm Kristen Smith, Pennsylvania editor for the Center Square. Today we're talking with the Center Square's Pennsylvania reporter, Anthony Hennon, about PennDOT's support for giving undocumented immigrants driver's licenses. So, Anthony, what is going on here? Why is PennDOT behind this rule, and what is the reaction?
Yeah, so for some context here, this is something we see in a number of states already, actually. About 18 states, including our border states of Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey, and New York, give out driver's license to non-citizens. Generally, it's not to everybody. I mean, every state can kind of do this differently. In Pennsylvania, it's mostly a conversation centered around whether to issue IDs, driver's licenses, to individuals of TPS or temporary protected status, which is basically a quasi-legal designation. It's not just, anyone coming over and can't establish citizenship. But that's basically been the debate in Pennsylvania of whether to actually extend this out. Unsurprisingly, Republicans are fairly critical of doing such things, whereas Democrats have been more open to it. During the PennDOT budget hearing, PennDOT Secretary Mike Carroll iterated the administration's stance of the issuance of driver's license products to undocumented immigrants is something that the department supports, that I support, and the governor supports, with safeguards necessary to make sure that folks that are issued those products are treated the same as folks that have a regular driver's license. We are still actually waiting to figure out how many immigrants with temporary protected status have gotten a driver's license over the last decade. PennDOT is still, we're still waiting on PennDOT to release that information.
And would conceptually, if this policy were to become enacted, would they be subject to real ID requirements?
So I would phrase it as real ID is something that's issued for citizens or someone with a green card, some sort of legal status already. So I don't think when we're talking about the broader issue of real ID, which everyone in Pennsylvania now is supposed to update their ID due to federal law, I do not believe real ID actually extends to the discussion of issuing it to undocumented immigrants. That's more, again, this is a federal thing that's been pushed and has been delayed a few times now since the pandemic hit. But essentially, PennDOT is arguing that issuing real ID in general is very rigorous. Secretary Carroll said that he has the greatest level of faith in our driver's license and motor vehicle folks to verify the quote substantial documentation and getting real ID only to people who should have them. So this would not apply, but this is something that's filtering through Pennsylvania more broadly.
You wrote that only 20% of Pennsylvania drivers actually have a real ID. Is there some concern about getting everyone up to that 100%? Is it burdensome for Pennsylvania, or what's the holdup there?
Yeah, so it's complicated, again, because of these federal laws. When real ID actually kicks in, you will not even be able to take a domestic flight, for instance, without having a real ID. So if you don't have a real ID, you show up to the airport. If you're flying, from Pennsylvania to North Carolina, federal law would actually not let you board the plane. You would need to use something else like a passport to prove that your ID is up to standards. So again, Carroll pointed out that real ID is going to be a real challenge for the traveling public. He says it's going to be a really challenging day when these mandates kick in. Because again, it's only a minority of Pennsylvania drivers have a real ID. Even when I lived in North Carolina, I already had a real ID. But when I came up to Pennsylvania and was updating my license, this was during COVID, and the DMV simply was not offering real ID licenses at that point. They paused it for a while. So this is something that is going to be a pain. It's going to have some really annoying and ugly consequences here. I think as we see, I believe the deadline now is sometime, I want to say like spring 2025, somewhere in that neighborhood. But as that gets closer, PennDOT's going to be really pushing out, hey, everyone needs to get a real ID. You need to update your license to avoid a lot of these challenges.
Thank you, Anthony, for joining me today. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com.
Audible is a great way to gain access to an ever-growing selection of audiobooks. They've got what everyone's listening to, bestsellers, new releases, that story you've been waiting for. Follow the link in our show description to get 30 days of Audible free.